Good morning.
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 Morning to everyone on these three levels, here in the hall or here in the temple garden or on the broader temple garden, which encircles the globe now. I had an email from someone from Britain about teachings a couple days ago and was freaking me out a little bit. So I hope you're here today. Please feel free to move around a little bit if you're in the yard or in the hall, and there's some free seats if you like to move to a place that's easier to see, or turn your cushions so that you can look this direction. Feel free to do that now or anytime throughout the talk. And happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Yeah, I feel of the things in my life which spurred me to this path of Buddhism. One of the kind of the top three is definitely being a father. I became a father when I just turned 21, and that's quite a thing. And I have never regretted ever having three beautiful children who aren't so much children anymore, but now they get to take care of me, I hope. I think a lot about how so much is changing in our world, and what it means to be a father, of course, changes. And it's also it's just very important. And how much we appreciate fathers, how much we appreciate fatherhood. Today is a good day to remind ourselves of that. Whether we're, had experience with our own fathers that were very good or not so good, to see the way in which fatherhood is important to our lives only brings us all up. I feel very fortunate to have not only a great relationship with my dad, but to have had a real model for how to be a person, how to be a man, how to be a father. So I'll call him today, and I'll go visit him maybe tomorrow or the next day. He just lives in Salem. So this morning I went to start talking about meditation. And you'd think that's an easy thing to do, but it turns out it's not. It's not for a few reasons. One reason is because it's a little bit like talking about love. It has broad meanings, broad implications. It's very subtle. It's a current which moves our life in deep and profound ways. And so to talk about it always feels a little bit like creating a problem. One of the most famous teachings of the Buddha Shakyamuni was when he held a simple flower like this one, and he said nothing. And as the legend goes, Mahakashapa smiled. Maybe some of you are smiling, but I can't see it. Out there, I can't see outside. And that's said to be the beginning of the lineages of the Zen school. I didn't bring this flower for that purpose, but it was here. I just noticed how amazing it is. There's another reason it's hard to talk about meditation, and that's because our school doesn't do it very much. Talk about meditation. We're a Zen school. Soto Zen Buddhism is the particular lineage that this temple belongs to. And Zazen, the way we say meditation, is everything's organized around it. When we meet for almost anything, we'll sit in Zazen for at least some amount of time. There's a lot of emphasis on meditation or emphasis on Zazen, but there's a real hesitancy to talk about meditation, to talk about what it is or what's inside of it. And I understand that. I mean, I'm part of this lineage, but it makes a lot of sense to me. It's a little bit like sometimes people will say to me, oh, you and your wife, you seem to have such a wonderful relationship. You seem to love each other so much and get along so well. And I'm like, yeah, it is, And they said, well, tell me about that. And I'm like, Don't want to talk about it too much. I don't want to pick it apart. I don't want to take the flower and say, oh yeah, this is the stem, and let me take the leaves off here and let me show you the inside where this part happens and that part happens. Because there's something about the completeness of the flower that you don't want to disturb by overanalyzing it. And so I have that feeling about meditation. It's so simple. It's so straightforward. So radically straightforward that the part of our mind that wants to be able to take apart and to own, the part of our mind that wants to be able to go through some kind of a ritualized process in which now this becomes mine, like I'm going through the checkout stand, right? And you pay your 25 cents for the pack of bubble gum. That's what it used to be. $1 for the pack of bubble gum, whatever it is. Now that's my bubble gum, right? I get to chew it up. Right? I get to own it. It gets to be mine. I've been instructed in meditation. I practice meditation, therefore meditation is mine. It doesn't work that way. It's not something that can be owned. And so for me, that's a beautiful starting place. If we want to talk about meditation, if we want to talk about the freedom of meditation, is that it's not something which is to be owned. It's not something that is to be manipulated. It's not something to be manipulated by. Right? It is freedom, a very direct and radical way. And over the past several weeks, I've been speaking about the 6 perfections. The 6 perfections is one of the oldest ways that Buddhism talks about the path of waking up. And in the Mahayana tradition, the 6 perfections were those earliest teachings. Generosity is the first. The second is ethics. The third is patience or forbearance. The fourth is vigor. The fifth is meditation. And the sixth is wisdom. This time I started talking about patience. And been trying to emphasize that there's a direct freedom in each of these practices. We can start anywhere on the 6 if we wanted to study them. You can start anywhere, right? And you can go move backwards, forwards, skip them, whatever. They're all completely interpenetrating, right? But the reason that I chose this time patience and emphasizing freedom is what I was seeing was so many people trying to be patient, trying to bear the circumstance. And at that point, we hadn't come to the moment of the full expression of Black Lives Matter that's happening right now. So this was about COVID-19, right? It still is about COVID-19, right? But what I was seeing was people just kind of like gritting their teeth and trying to get through it. That's one way. That's one kind of patience. That's one kind of forbearance, is to just hunker down, right? Do our best. Try to make the best out of a difficult situation. But I wanted to highlight how there's something more than just waiting in patience. That perfection has a freedom right inside of it. You don't practice patience so that later on you can feel free. But there is a practice of patience which unlocks a freedom in you immediately to bear the difficulty of life. It isn't just about being strong. It's not about waiting out difficulty. But it's about something ungraspable. That an ungraspable world challenges us deeply, because its ungraspability means it will deliver many things to us, which is not what we want. Or we want something else. And there, in that place where we need to be patient, right? There's a way to unlock our tight grip. And as we see that the world is ungraspable, we can wake up to the ungraspability of our own heart. And this begins the freedom of presence, to be present with. So it's very immediate. We're not waiting for it, but we're practicing that. We're practicing encountering the ungraspable quality of the world, which uncovers the ungraspable truth of our heart. And we're able to stay connected with things in a way that we never could otherwise. When we spoke about vigor, I was talking about the pure and courageous minds linked to other beings. This is a quote from the Prajnaparamita in 8,000 lines, probably the oldest teaching on these perfections. Pure and courageous minds linked to other beings. That to be vigorous, right, to bring up the energy and the conviction of practice and awakening, is not something that we do simply on our own, but that pure and courageous minds of the bodhisattvas are linked to other beings. That actually the vigor that we receive, the energy which moves through us, comes from a deep awakening to our inseparability. That other beings and myself are not two. That actions that are based not in controlling other beings for the purposes of gaining power, but appreciating how we are together, how our minds are intrinsically linked. Now, I don't mean mind here as like the content of our head. I mean our lives. Our lives are inseparable. That is vibrant. That there's a freedom of vitality that comes from that that's totally different than how it is that we would hold part of the world down to gain our energy. And we can feel that immediately. You know, how nice it is to just be with other beings. You know, whether they're human embodied or otherwise, flowers, bugs. I spent a couple days over on the coast. Unbelievable amount of birds. So inspiring. Do you ever watch the birds do their like, and they're just their whole body, like all the way down to their tail. And they do that over and over and over and over again. Just like, wow. No wonder humans aren't waking up very quick. We need to learn from the birds. They just put their whole selves in, you know, together. There's all these other birds around. And my wife, there's many things I love about my wife, but this was just, we're there, sorry, let's divulge a little, or digress a little bit. We were staying in a little cabin by the coast, and there's one bird that's not coming to mind, a thrush, that she really likes, and she knows the call of the thrush. And so this thrush, they're very shy birds, these thrush, and they make a kind of whoo sound like this. And so she would hear it, and so she goes, and then the thrush goes, whoo, and she says, and pretty soon the thrush comes out of the bushes and sits there, and they're just calling back and forth to each other. You know, it was so beautiful. And then I tried it. I wasn't very good at it. Probably not enough love in my whistle. Anyway, why was I talking about that? Oh, together, yeah. So, in a classical sense, when we talk about the 6 perfections, the first 3, generosity, ethics, and forbearance, these are seen to be qualities that can be enacted in, for lack of a better word, we'll say mundane ways. These 3 perfections can be enacted without them, or these 3 things can be enacted without them rising to the level of perfection, without them rising to the level of producing freedom, okay? Or uncovering the intrinsic freedom in which we are all held all the time. Right? We can be generous, okay? We can be ethical, and we can be patient in a way that is just very simple and straightforward, but doesn't actually connect us with freedom. When it comes to the level of vigor, the traditional teachings tell us that if we're going to practice vigor, that it has to rise to the level of freedom. There's no way to get the vigor that's talked about here in the perfections without it being something about freedom, without it unlocking the ways in which we keep ourselves in karmic cycles. Now, the reason I think this is important when we're looking at this division is to see that when we move from that kind of possibility of just grit and bear it kind of patience, which is good, Buddhism sees that as good, but it doesn't see it as complete. When we move to vigor, it's asking us to create a different alignment or to find some truer alignment than just doing what is good. Right? It's asking us to find something in ourself which leads to true wisdom. In the classical sense, vigor comes as the 4th in the list because that's the place where if you're going to take on this thing called meditation, you're going to need some energy. And you don't need the energy that's just like, how can I be the most powerful, dominating being in the universe kind of energy, but the kind of energy that is deeply aligned with the presence of linked minds. That our being and all of the beings around me are completely enmeshed. The energy that arises from there is necessary for the practice of meditation. Right? If we try to enact meditation through control, then we'll have some certain kind of success, but we won't have the success that leads to real freedom. It won't lead to real wisdom. It may lead to certain kinds of mental powers, but that's all. So when we talk about this shift from forbearance to vigor, vigor is a preparation for meditation. Right? And meditation is deeply linked with wisdom, and wisdom is what animates all of the perfections as a true crossing over, the possibility that they can save us from this kind of karmic cycles which lock our lives in suffering. So that's a little bit of a technical thing, but keep it in mind when we start talking about meditation. Keep it in mind when you're telling yourself, why don't I meditate more? I don't know if anyone has had that experience, but I hear from people all the time. They're like, when I come to the temple and I meditate and I just feel like my whole life seems like it's better. You know, if I'm practicing meditation, and then it's like, yeah, but then I get on my own and pretty soon I'm not meditating, you know? So don't whip the meditation. Right? Don't make meditation the horse that you're trying to whip there. Come back to vigor. But don't come back to the vigor of how do I muscle myself into it. Come back to the vigor of how can you hear the call of the world? How can you hear the thrush in the bush? And how can you respond? Right? That's where your energy comes from, your energy for meditation. Not from being the hero, you know, but from being deeply enmeshed and recognizing that. That's where the hero's power comes from. The bodhisattva's power comes from. So, meditation. I was trying to write something. What do I want to call it? And so I wrote today, it's an invitation to the precious light of your own body, your own mind or heart, and your own breath. An invitation to the precious light of your own body, your own heart, your mind, your breath. I feel very lucky to have been introduced to meditation when I was, I don't remember, it was maybe 12 or 13, and I was taking a after-school class. Remember when they used to have those? After-school class on Chinese brush painting. And there was a teacher, I wish I remember her name. I would chant sutras for her. She was teaching us a real simple Chinese brush painting. And before we would paint, she would have us sit quietly, and she would give us a very simple kind of meditation. In fact, the meditation she would normally have was about a flower. She would say to imagine a flower in your mind. And then she would take us through a very simple process of paying attention to the flower and then just releasing our image of the flower. I didn't keep doing the Chinese brush painting, but it felt to me like someone had showed me a world that I knew was there, but I didn't know how to look into. It was like the magic of the world, which, you know, when you're 12 or 13, you haven't shaken that off so much, hopefully. Yeah. And, but now someone showed me how I could look into it. Not just feel it, not just kind of notice when it was coming by, but it was like those, have you ever seen those things when people look down into the ocean? In Japan, they use them, the people who gather shellfish. It's like a wooden disc with a piece of glass on the bottom, and you just put it on the top of the water, and then you can see down in. Has anyone ever used one of those? If you have goggles or you have a face mask, it's kind of the same thing. But I think it's cool about these is you like in the boat, you know, and you just drop it on the top of the water and you look down and you can see down into the ocean or into the lake because it takes the disturbance off the top of the water, you know? That's exactly what it felt to me like. Someone just went, boom. Now the catch there is what you see under there is not always awesome, right? Seeing into that world of mind is treacherous, as it turns out, but it's also beautiful. So I'd encourage you to think about that. What is the way that you frame meditation? Is it an exercise that you do? Right? When we think about it that way, the kind of energy that I have to accrue for it and apply myself to, etc., has a certain kind of limitation. What I'm trying to present here is an invitation to a broader way to hold this. If you thought about meditation as being a way to see into something, then where would the energy come from? What kind of interest would you need to have to look into it, not just to kind of enforce the exercise upon yourself? So an invitation to a light which is already your own. No one can give it to you because you already have it. But this light is a strict teacher. To be able to see into mind. The light of consciousness that is there. Very strict. But she will never take away your freedom. She is strict because she will never take away your freedom. The teaching that says, just do it like this, right? Just take yourself and mold it to this shape. Do that. That's the right thing. That's not such a strict teaching. It might feel uncomfortable because you're doing something that someone told you to do, right? And trying to hold it in a certain way. But the very strict teacher is the one that says, of course, we are here together. You're at the table. What will you do? I can't take that from you. She'll tell you that again and again and again and again and again. You'll get really sick of it if you meditate. You sit down and you're like, oh, here I am with the one thing I can't get away from. Me, my body, my mind, my heart, my breath. And the beauty of that is that when we stay present with it, when we stay present with intention, as is expressed through my body, through breath, through mind, we see how it's ungraspable. It's me. But I can't control it. But I'm still responsible. Right? Just think about the quality of your mind. Will you sit quietly? I don't know how many billions of things it does. We're sitting there for 20 minutes or something together. How you experience that. Maybe very quiet, maybe very busy. There's all kinds of possibilities. But you're responsible. But you can't totally control it. It's not of the nature of being controlled. Now, in a classical understanding, a classical Buddhist understanding, what you're experiencing moment to moment, all the time, but we'll just focus on meditation right now, is the results of karma. Karma are patterns that are laid down within, we could just say they're like grooves that are laid down in consciousness. And so all phenomena that appear, all experiences that appear, are appearing through that movement of karma. This is a very classical way of understanding, very kind of strict. If we tried to bring that into some more modern language, we might say that all of my experience is an expression of habits. That what I'm experiencing moment after moment after moment as I sit in meditation, or as I do anything, but we're just talking about meditation right now, that what I'm experiencing is the expression of habits which have formed, and they're expressing themselves, I'm saying this in a very technical way, they're expressing themselves as me. I experience them as me, right? Like if I have a tendency to have a very, some people have this mind that thinks everything's funny. Does anybody have that one where you just, like if you sit quietly, you just start going, like you start laughing? Some people are like that. My best friend in Japan is like that. He went to the monastery because he was like a juvenile delinquent, and so that's what they do in Japan is they take you to the monastery, or they used to. They take you to the monastery and make him stay there for a little while. And you know when you get the giggles, and so he's sitting there in the monastery. They have a ton. It's like a meditation platform, and him and his best friend. That's Kuma's my buddy's name, and his best friend Stomu at that time. They're like freshmen in high school or something, and they sit there on the ton, and they have to sit meditation. And of course, Kuma, he's one of those people who just laugh at everything. So he starts laughing, and then of course Stomu starts laughing, and they both start laughing, and the monks pretty soon come and drag him off the thing and take him outside and yell at him or whatever, which only makes them laugh harder. Does anyone have a mind like that, by the way? So we have it's like that? Okay, sometimes. So if you're that kind of person and you sit down, you might just start thinking things are hilarious. Like, why did they do that stupid thing on the altar? Like, whatever, and you experience something that's just funny. Or maybe you have a mind that's very dark. You think about things very deeply, and so maybe you're there. And probably you have a whole bunch of characters inside of you, and something's happening when you sit down. I guarantee you that if you went around the room and you talked with everybody here and online and out in the yard, and you said, what did you experience in that 20 minutes? You get this huge range, right? Although almost nothing is really different about what it is that we're experiencing in a concrete sense, right? Okay, I'm sure I've made my point. I have a tendency to do that bigger than it needs to be, but so we have this difference of experience. We have a habit. It expresses itself as me. I'm used to thinking I have a habit, right? I have a habit, but this is inversing it. It's saying that these habits, that these karmic patterns, they express themselves, and I experience them as me. It's what I call me. It's what I call experience. And I adjust, right? All the time. I'm always adjusting to try to be right, to try to be better, to try to relieve suffering, hopefully, right? To do all the things that will make life better. I'm always adjusting, I'm always adjusting, I'm always adjusting, I'm always adjusting. And those habits, they get modified according to my adjustment. But they don't get unlocked. So again, we're talking about meditation, talking about recognizing this very strict teacher, which reminds us again and again that we're free. Your intention is there. You could get up. You could stay seating. You could think about something. You could not think about something. You could breathe in deep. You could breathe out deep. You could move your eyebrows. You can move your hands. You have that total freedom. It's reminding you again and again and again and again. But it's also reminding you that each thing that you're experiencing, all the things which you call an experience moment after moment as you're sitting there quietly, that those are coming through patterns. They're coming through expressions of habits, of mind, of heart, of breath, of body. So since you're free, what are you going to do? What do you like? Do you like those habits? Do you like the quality that's there? Do you think it's helpful? Does it feel free? Or do you just lock it down because the freedom's scary? What do you do? This is a question of meditation. In Nagarjuna's writings on meditation, and Nagarjuna was one of the earliest proponents of this six perfections teaching, one of the great ancestors of Mahayana Buddhism. He talks about meditation as being ingesting the medicine of wisdom. Think about that. So if wisdom is what animates all the perfections, wisdom is the thing that helps us cross over beyond the habits, beyond just reenacting the habits again and again and again and again and again and again. Wisdom is the thing that has the possibility to show us how to unlock that. Right? And so oftentimes meditation is seen as being what produces wisdom. That's a very classical understanding. Sometimes people will say that meditation is like the candle and wisdom is like the flame. So you have to practice the meditation so the wisdom will have some place to burn. That's a very classical kind of image. But here, Nagarjuna calls the wisdom medicine, that it needs to be ingested. That wisdom, which essentially refers to emptiness, or refers to dependent origination, refers to the fact that we're all completely intertwined. I get to own nothing as an individual. How do I ingest that medicine? Nagarjuna says that's what meditation is. To ingest. I think after ingesting, you have to digest. Right? You have to be digested. All of those things are happening with meditation. Well, you hear, not right now here at the temple, we have some kind of a truck coming by. I don't know what kind of truck this is. It's Sunday, so it's probably not the garbage truck, but something. Medicine of wisdom. In, what do you call those things? Internal combustion engine. It's giving you something. Do you realize that that movement of that truck is not separate from your mind? One iota. So when we sit in meditation, in a way, we can't help but receive the medicine of wisdom. And yet we fight it. We fight it. We can make meditation our project. We make it the symbol of what I would be doing if I was being good right now. And then we do it when we want to be good. And then we don't do it when we don't want to be good. And then we develop all kind of attitude around that, right? Being good or not being good. This invitation to the precious light of your own body, of your mind, your heart, your breath, it's much more organic than just doing something that you were told. It's not just be like this. It's not just snap to grid. I recently found out that image only works for a few people that were using computers at a particular time. There's this function that used to be a snap to grid. There's a grid underneath there and everything would go to the right place if you clicked that button. Right? But it's also not just some fluffy, feel-good, try to stay in the sweetness of life. And this is something that's really hard to encounter. If you take up this practice, this invitation to your body, to your mind, your heart, your breath, you will encounter things that are unfathomably difficult. You will encounter those things whether you meditate or not. But now you will be invited to encounter them with their depth in full display. Things can't be hidden so easily. And so as we meditate, I oftentimes encourage people first to find the enjoyment. To find the enjoyment of giving up the struggle for a little bit so you can find some centeredness. But then, you found that center for a reason. Because when the hurricane of life comes to your door, you know something different than just pushing and pulling. Because in the pushing and pulling, the real hurricane of life, your pushing and pulling won't help that much. Actually, it only makes things worse. Nagarjuna says that the bodhisattvas employ the power of meditation to ingest the medicine of wisdom. Right? So to practice that ingesting the medicine of wisdom all the time, through all kinds of circumstance, through things that are enjoyable, through things that are difficult. As we ingest that, we begin to know that alignment from which wisdom springs forth. Another image that Nagarjuna offers is that wisdom is like a lamp. Here again, he talks about it as being like a flame. But he said, when it's in the wind, it's very hard for it to really illuminate. If you bring it into a still room, now the illumination of that lamp becomes really clear. So again, bringing into the stillness so that the lamp can be recognized and relied upon. So one image, ingest the medicine of wisdom. Another image is you already have the wisdom. But if you don't allow for some stillness to emerge, how will it illuminate your being? How will you know that your body is filled with light? How will you know that your heart is filled with light? How will you know that your breath is sweeping that light across all things at all times? If you don't know about this stillness. And that's the last image I'll leave you with today. Is this still room. That still room is not outside, but neither is it here just at the edges of your body or the edges of what it is that you can see. You are a stupa. A stupa is the ancient receptacle for the fragments of a Buddha. So when the Buddha passed away, parts of his body called relics were put into and these mounds had been made for millennia before that, right? But in the case of Buddhism, the Buddha's body, his tooth or a bone, fragment of bone, or something, it went into these stupas. They're shaped like this. And they just sit there. Like a still, empty room. With that Buddha shining right inside. So you are that stupa. Right here, you enshrine the upright luminosity of the Buddha's awakening. But at the same time, you are contained in a stupa. This room, this shared time. We are held together there. And inside of you, there is a stupa, a still room, which is below this level of consciousness in which you're reacting to the eyes, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. All of those things that you're enacting on this level, there's a stupa of total stillness that sits at the center of that, unconcerned. So I encourage you, don't just think of meditation as how you're going to reform yourself. Think of it as the opportunity to manifest the stupa which holds the relics of the Buddha's awakening, which holds the vibrancy of light that entered this world.